Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse witch, and today, after what feels like ages, I have decided to finally film another video on one of the Norse gods. And this time we are talking about another goddess, one of my personal favorites. We are talking about Skadi, because I felt like, one, she's one of my personal favorites, two, she's the first god or goddess I have ever given an offering to, so that in general just felt special. And also we are slowly approaching winter time, so I felt what a perfect time to talk about a winter goddess, so that if you want to and you live someone where it's getting nice and wintry and snowy and cold, if you want to honor her during winter, now here you have all of the information you need. Let's go! Let us, as always, start with what we actually know about Skadi. Skadi is the daughter of the giant Thiassi, so yes, Skadi is actually a Jotun. She's not originally one of the Aesir or Vanir. She's actually a Jotun, the daughter of the giant Thiassi. But in one of her main stories, and I will get into that later, she becomes the wife of Njordr, who is of course one of the Vanir who live with the Aesir, so she basically marries into the families of the gods. If you know who Njordr is, you probably know that he's the father of Freyr and Freya. And what's very interesting is that Gylfaginning actually implies that Skadi is Freyr and Freya's mother, whereas Ynglinga Saga and Lokasenna imply that Freyr and Freya are the children of Njordr and his sister. So we can't be quite sure who actually is Freyr and Freya's mother, but one source says that it's Skadi. But let us quickly talk about the main story that we have about Skadi, because I feel like while it's not too long, it gives away a lot of Skadi's character. So, it all started when Thor killed Thiassi. I won't get into that story because that is a whole other story, long one. But it all started when Thor killed Thiassi, because Skadi, of course, daughter of Thiassi, wanted revenge. Like, the Aesir killed her father, so of course she wanted revenge. So she marched in full armor, marched up to Asgard and wanted revenge. She wanted to strike them basically. But they actually settled with a compensation. And the compensation is very interesting because it involves various different things. One of the things, for example, is that the Aesir have to make her laugh. Where of course Loki comes in, because who else would play the jester? So Loki basically ties a string between a goat's beard and his testicles. And then of course, like, the goat wants to get away and pulls on his testicles, and like, it's a whole show. But he ends up finally making Skadi laugh. So that's one thing. Another thing is that Odin threw up, or like, there different sources say different things on who actually did it, but I will just settle with Odin. Odin took Thiassi's eyes, like his eyeballs, and threw them up in the sky, and they became stars. Very random, but okay, I mean, we also have a giant's brain as clouds, so who cares? But that is one part. But the most important part for Skadi is that she was granted one of the Aesir as a husband. The thing is, though, that she couldn't just say, I want this one. There was a trick to it. Of course, there was a trick to it. She couldn't just choose anyone, because if she could have, she would have just chosen Balder, of course, because she's the shining one, the beautiful one. No, she had to choose her future husband by only looking at his feet. So, of course, she thought to herself, okay, probably the most beautiful and the most clean, the nicest feet will probably belong to Balder, right? Makes sense. So she chose those feet. The problem is, though, that they didn't actually belong to Balder, they belonged to Njordr. So that is how Skadi became Njordr's wife. She chose him by his feet. But the thing is, the marriage didn't really end up going well, because, I mean, we have on one side a Jotun, a frost giant, who comes from the snowy mountains, the icy mountains where it's cold and stuff. And on the other hand, we have a god who comes from the sea. So they didn't really get along, and they couldn't really settle with either of them living at the other one's place. So like Njordr didn't want to live in the snowy mountains, and Skadi didn't want to live by the sea, and it all just didn't work out. So in the end they decided to just split up, which I think is very interesting, because if I'm correct, that's the only instance where two gods/goddesses actually split up. So I feel like that is very impressive. Very interesting is that the Ynglinga saga says that afterwards, after Skadi and Njordr split up, that she actually had multiple sons from Odin. But the thing is that the Ynglinga saga basically said that those sons became rulers, and so it was just one more tactic to basically create a lineage from the rulers, from the kings to the gods. So it's probably just invented by the writers of the Ynglinga saga. But still I found it interesting and worth mentioning. Skadi is a goddess of hunting and skiing. So of course she comes from the snowy mountains, so she walks around in snowshoes, she goes skiing, she hunts game there. She's actually also called ski goddess by the Celts, so that is one of her canons, which of course is always very important to look at. When Skadi goes hunting, she hunts with bow and arrow, so kind of like Artemis, which I think is interesting. And that's usually also what you see her depicted as. It's usually Skadi on skis with bow and arrow. Of course, as a goddess who lives in the snowy mountains, she's also associated with wolves. It's said that, of course, where she lived, that wolves were howling there. That's one of the things that Njordr couldn't stand. So she is connected to wolves. And lastly, while we don't really have like a ton of stories about Skadi, we know that there was a cult around her. So there were people actually worshipping Skadi. We also have surviving place names that derive from her name. So it's very obvious that Skadi was actually worshipped by the people, even though there are not a lot of stories about her, which is interesting because, for example, with Loki we have like a million stories where he's mentioned and a main character, but we don't know anything about him ever being worshipped. So it's kind of flipped, which I find very interesting. So that is what we know about Skadi. So next up, let me quickly wrap up my experience with Skadi, because it's not a huge amount, because I have never really like worked with her. I have only really venerated her. I've given her some offerings from time to time, but nothing really that serious. So I don't have like a huge amount of things to say, but still I want to give you my input. So first of all, I find Skadi extremely impressive because she is a self-made goddess. She has not been born into the group of the Aesir or the Vanir. So she wasn't born a goddess. She was born a Jotun, who usually are seen as the enemies of the Aesir and the Vanir. But still she managed to get herself goddess status, which I personally think is so cool and so badass. So for me that just shows like confidence, first of all, because she's one Jotun. And she went up to the Aesir and said like, I will strike you if you don't give me what I want. And ended up getting herself a husband, a god as a husband. Like how cool is that? So like I see her as extremely confident. She has an extreme amount of strength, of course. She's extremely independent. Also like the fact that Njordr and Skadi in the end just split up, and like nothing bad happens. Like none of them like kill each other or anything. They were just like, well, it doesn't work out, so we will just split up. I feel like that shows how independent she is. Like she just lives there in the frosty mountains, in the snow, going hunting, taking care of herself, doing her thing. I feel like that is so cool. Because she is a Jotun that ended up getting herself goddess status and became one of the Aesir, I kind of also see her as like this stranger that lives in surroundings that aren't necessarily where they belong. So for example, I think a very classic example is that Skadi is oftentimes venerated by people, mostly, like it's usually women, who work in an area that is usually associated with men. That is actually what I, back in the day, when I also still identified as a woman, I identified with that a lot because I work in IT, so I work surrounded by men. So that is something that I connected over her with, but I don't only see that with women who work in men's abodes, basically. I see that with a lot of other things. I mean, for example, with, I don't know, a queer person who lives surrounded by only heterosexual people, for example, or just in general anyone who feels like they don't really fit in. I also connect her, of course, hugely with winter. So whenever it gets really cold, and like sadly it doesn't really snow around here a lot anymore, but whenever it does snow, I get very excited and I feel the need to give her an offering. So winter time is Skadi time, and I really, really like that. And then lastly, when it comes to her energy, which, like, since we don't really work closely together, I don't know a lot about her energy, but I always feel her as more of a serious goddess, not like a playful one like Loki. Like, Loki is so playful and just like all over the place and chaotic, and I feel like Skadi is more like a little bit strict, a little bit serious. She's not like the one you would like joke around with or something. I mean, I sometimes give Loki center shocks as an offering. I definitely would not do that with Skadi. I don't know if she would take that well. But of course, I'm not the only person who has like experiences with Skadi. So of course, as always, I asked my community, all of you out there, to tell me about your experiences with Skadi, what you feel like her energy feels like, what kinds of offerings you give to her, etc. So let's dive into that. I only recently read about her in a fiction book, but I'd love to know more. Oh, a fiction. I want to know which fiction book that is. Fun fact, I found out about Skadi because I don't remember what that brand is called, but it's a jewelry brand, and they brought out a whole jewelry line named Skadi. And I just thought, that's such a cool name. What does that mean? And I Googled it and I realized it's a goddess. And that was it. I feel cold, wildness, and inaccessibility from her. This is what makes me respect her. I kind of feel the same, like cold and wildness definitely, and that of course makes sense. I mean, first of all, she's a frost giant, she's a Jotun, and she lives like in the wild, snowy mountains, so that of course makes sense. But I also feel this kind of inaccessibility, so it's not like she's extremely approachable. She's more like standoffish and a little bit reserved, maybe. I definitely feel the same way about her. But I don't feel like she's like unkind or anything like that. It's just like she doesn't instantly open up to you and is like motherly or anything like that. Not at all. I don't feel any motherly vibes from her. Next up, her energy for me is very much like a determined coach. She's here to help you accomplish. I can see that, definitely. Minimal, I feel like she responds to women better, but that's just been my experience. I don't know if I see that. I don't know. But I mean, when I connected to her, I still identified as a woman, so maybe that doesn't count. I think of her as a bad bitch. She gives me that vibe. I haven't worked with her very much though. Same though, definitely a bad bitch. I've done offerings for her on Samhain. She was pretty quick to respond. She's quite the serious divinity and may take offense quite fast to jokes. My boyfriend made one and she was offended for a while, but accepted his apology after. Other than that, she's kind and really great to make offerings to as a beginner. There we have it. I also see her as quite serious. But the thing is, she even settled for a compensation with the Aesir who killed her father. So I guess she's probably not mad for very long, I would guess. Skadi is a deity I feel close to up here in Alaska. When I work with her, I feel her patience, independence, determination, and survivalist nature. It is very useful to have a relationship with her up here when there is 7 months of snow and barely any sunlight. I feel her presence in the mountains and hills around me. It must be amazing to connect to Skadi in that kind of surrounding. As I said, it doesn't really snow here anymore, and if it snows, it doesn't stay for longer than a day. It usually turns just to mud after a couple of hours. So I mean, I don't want to have snow for 7 months, but like a little bit of snow would be nice from time to time. but I bet that it's so amazing to connect with her in an environment like that. And patience. Patience is interesting because I would just guess that as a Jotun she's not that patient, but maybe that's just a wrong guess of mine. I don't know. I don't know if I see her as patient, but independent, determined, survivalist, most definitely. Next up, Skadi is my primary deity in the winter months, strong survivalist, self-reliant, powerful and brave. She represents standing up for what's right, even against impossible odds. I honor her at the first snowfall every year and give offerings of hot beverages to keep her warm on the cold mountain peaks. Hail Skadi! Hail Skadi! And I agree with every single thing. I think the standing up for what's right definitely makes a lot of sense, agreed. And I like the thought of honoring her at the first snowfall. I think that's amazing. Maybe I will do that if it snows this year. Maybe, fingers crossed. I worked with Skadi for a short amount of time, but I found her presence to be very strong and persevering and gave me strength to push through a troubling time in my life. I can definitely see that. Skadi is my matron deity who I have worked with for quite a few years now. The best way I can describe her is that she encompasses all the aspects of winter. The harshness, the resilience needed to survive, the icy beauty and the comforting warmth of a fire after braving the cold. She is very direct with her messages, but has never been unkind with me and is super empowering to work with. I like to give her offerings of warm beverages like chai tea and baked goods. Also, I dedicate winter activities to her, such as ice skating and archery. I have found that she is not picky about offerings, so long as they are given with sincerity and respect. I definitely recommend reaching out to her if you are interested. Just be respectful and be ready for the possibility of a lot of personal growth. That is such an amazing story. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all of that, because that sounds amazing. That actually makes me want to start working with her a little bit closer. Maybe it will happen. But I really like the idea to give her hot beverages as offerings. That sounds very nice. By the way, I planned on talking about offerings at the last part of the video, so that I can also take the community ideas in account. But the hot beverages is a very great idea. Also something like hot chocolate or something sounds amazing. I haven't worked with her, but prayed to her for a winter season some years ago. I didn't really feel any response or anything back, but a day I went cross-country skiing. I suddenly intensely felt her there skiing with me. Other than that, I haven't felt anything since. Maybe because I live near a fjord, I have been thinking, and that she resides in the mountains. I mean, that makes sense, right? That's also why her relationship with Njordr didn't work out, because she just wanted to be in the mountains. Which is also a shame for me, because I live by the sea. I mean, I don't live at the sea, but near the sea, and there are literally no mountains here. So that's why it's pretty hard to connect with her usually. But I can definitely see her being very close by when you go skiing in the mountains in the snow. I leave an offering of meat once a year. I sense that cold energy coming and I talk to her, Hail Skadi or something. That does make sense. I feel like especially game, like offering the meat of game, that was maybe even, wow, hunted by yourself would be perfect, or just like hunted by friends or something. That would be incredible. All right, and the rest of the comments were people not knowing a lot, but wanting to know more. So I really hope that this video helps you in that. So let us lastly, as I said, talk about offerings. Of course, we don't know really a lot about like food or drink or anything like that. And since I don't work with her, I don't have that much experience with that. But I definitely like the idea of hot beverages as an offering. So maybe you can try that. And the meat of game, wild animals that have been hunted for their meat. If you are okay with that, of course, I know a lot of people aren't, but like if you are, then maybe you can give that as an offering, especially if you have hunted it yourself or a friend of you hunted it or something like that. I feel like something that Skadi probably, at least that's what I sense, probably might appreciate even more is devotional acts for her. For example, things like skiing is an obvious one, or like taking a hike in the snowy mountains when it's really, really cold. So that's actually like not a hike that's too enjoyable, you know, it has to be a little bit challenging. I think that would be an amazing devotional act for her. or learning how to do archery. That's something that I have really wanted to do for ages, and I feel like that would be such an amazing devotional act for her. Also, of course, like, if you feel like it, going hunting, she is a huntress, so going hunting could be a devotional act for her. Something that I kind of felt like would be cool is if you do go somewhere where it's snowy, especially when it's in the mountains, then maybe collect some snow, let it melt, and give her that water as an offering, so that it's like nice, cold snow water from the mountains or something. I feel like that could be an incredible offering. Then I also thought, like, to be more general, learning how to stand up for yourself and how to speak up for the things you want and to learn how to get what you want. I feel like that would be a very, very obvious one, because like that's like, at least for me, one of the main points or the main characteristics of Skadi is that she's like a self-made goddess and a badass, and she gets what she wants and she does what she wants. So that would be for me a kind of obvious one. Also, like, if you want something for the altar for her, for example, wolf related stuff, or like in general mountain and snow related stuff, maybe like some fake snow, or some tiny bow and arrow, or like some tiny skis, or you know, something decor like that. Maybe she would like that. And then lastly, I thought, since she is quite the active goddess, I mean, she goes skiing and hunting and stuff, I felt like probably more generally exercise could be a nice offering for her. I definitely like to do that for Thor, so who knows, maybe Skadi also likes that, so maybe that's something that you could try. And yeah, that is everything that I have for you about Skadi. In case I forgot something, which of course is very possible, or if you have further ideas for offerings, or you have some experiences with Skadi that you want to share with us, then please write it in the comments. I always love that. It's kind of like a little collection of stories and ideas for or around the god or the goddess. It's nice because then everyone who has watched the video can continue reading about them in the comments. I always love that. Of course, I don't want to forget the patron shout out. Thank you so much to SJ and Kate, Thistle, Adam Z, Kent, Brittany, Emma, Celine, Small Kata, Josh, Ellie, Nura, David, Christine, Rixie Business, Annalena, Ashley, Erica, Kristen, John, Phoenix, Jenny, Maggie, Misty, Amy, Bethany, Timothy, Coffee, the Honorary Gossip Squirrel, and Bjorn. Thank you so much for your support. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up. And of course, ring the bell down below so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. If you want to, then of course, feel free to check out my other socials and my online shop for ethically and sustainably sourced witchcraft and paganism tools. And if you want to support me in another way, then I have a Patreon, which you can also check out. And that being said, I will see you in the next video. Bye!